What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the best Innervate tier list in Where Winds Meet. A lot of players been asking the same thing over and over again. So, how should I plan my Innervate progression? Which one should I keep? And which one should I sacrifice to the tip exchange? So today we are breaking all of that down in detail by using my complete Innervate tier list. This tier list is based on hundreds of hours from the Chinese servers, then now about 200 hours of global server gameplay, and bunch of mine and my friend experiences as rank 1 players. And before we start, let me repeat one of the most important rules for new players. Before you reach max level, no progress system is more important than your Innervate. All of your nodes, all of your resources, and all of your time should go here first. The faster you push these tiers, the faster your combat power rises. Or some Innervates moving from tier 5 to 6 can give you more than 25% power upgrade. So that's why choosing the right one can be the easiest way to make your character super powerful. So first up we have the D tier, which represents the Innervates that fail to provide meaningful value even when invested deeply. These abilities either scale too poorly, offer inconsistent effects, or simply don't synergize with the way that the game functions in the current version. The biggest issue with these Innervates is that their math just doesn't hold up. The Trapped Beast, for example, sounds appealing on paper because it focuses on conditional damage boost, but these conditions almost never trigger in a way that benefits the high frequency rotation or burst setups. Then Sword Horizon and the Mountain Smite suffer from a similar flaw. They scale in ways that don't align with the modern play pattern. You can invest heavily, bring them up several tiers, and still barely feel their effect during the real combat. Then Riptide Reflex and the Shadow Assault are also misleading. They appear to lean into evasive gameplay, but the game simply doesn't reward the dodge triggered mechanic strongly enough, unless you're using a top tier synergy combo like the Breaking Point or the Soaring Spin. Without these synergies, these dodge-based D-tier Innervates will feel like a wasted slot with extremely low potential. Then Wind Beneath and Esoteric Revival will fall into the category of overly niche utility. Their effects don't meaningfully improve your DPS, survivability, or sustain in either PvE or PvP. You might feel a slight situational benefit, but in the game's long-term progression, where every percent matters, these gains are not strong enough to justify the investment. And then finally, the Flowing Words is the weakest of the group, by offering a strange mixture of utility and the minor buffs that don't stack well with any core build. No matter what weapon or playstyle you use, this Innervate simply fails to compete. So to keep it simple, you should recycle or exchange every one of these Innervates. There's no scenario in the long-term meta where they will perform even decently. Next up, let's move over to the C tier, where we have only few Innervates. These Innervates will fall into the category that I like to call as technically functional, but they're not relevant in the high-level PvE or PvP. Art of Resistance and the Rock Solid are defensive Innervates that provide stability and sustain, but Where Winds Meet is not a game where tank builds are super OP. Enemy damage patterns are designed so that the movement, iframe management, and timed defensive skills matter far more than passive durability increases. And then Thunderous Bloom performs slightly better, because it has an offensive aspect to it, but the scaling unfortunately is incredibly slow. You can bring it to tier 4 and still feel like this ability is barely contributing anything of significance to your overall DPS breakdown. In a game where top builds can generate hundreds of hits per rotation, effects that trigger infrequently or scale poorly simply cannot compete. So overall, C-tier Innervates are not bad, but they're not good enough to justify spending your rare nodes. If you're extremely early in the game and you need something to fill a slot temporarily, then they are acceptable, but ultimately every one of these should be recycled once you acquire better options. Then next, moving to the B tier, where things get more interesting. These Innervates can work, they're fun to play, and they offer clear, useful effects, but they fall short of A tier power and are often outperformed by more optimized options. Let's talk about the Seasonal Edge first, because many players are drawn to it. This Innervate is flashy, thematic and fun, especially with its seasonal visual effect, which makes it extremely appealing. But unfortunately, the Chinese servers deeply tested builds around it, and the conclusion was the same every time. this is a mess. The scaling is chaotic, the damage is inconsistent, and its rotations integration is just clunky. If you've already invested in a little bit, then don't panic, but also I don't recommend to sink even more of your resources in trying to force something that doesn't work. Then Evasive Charge and Adaptive Steal will offer mobility and defensive utility, which can be useful in difficult boss fights. They're not awful, but they don't increase your DPS enough to justify the long-term investment. Then Wolf Chaser's Art and Insightful Strike provides workable offensive boosts, but they're moderate in output and don't rise to the level of A and S tier picks. They're fine early, but eventually will feel like dead bait. Then next we got a few more healing focused inner base like the Royal Remedy, the Mending Loom and Restoring Blossom, which are attractive to new players. But once again, the meta does not favor the sustained inner base. Overall, healing is situational in this game, and high DPS builds will simply kill enemies fast enough that self-sustain is not needed. And then lastly, Blossom Barrage, Star Reacher and Exquisite Scenario are all functional but lack explosive potential. They contribute something but never enough to justify the long-term resource spending. So the rule for B tier is this: you can use them if you enjoy, but replace them when you can. They will hold you back later if you try to push them into the endgame. So your main goal is to focus only on A and S tier picks. Next up we have A tier, where we have inner base which are very strong and worth leveling, especially when paired with the right weapon combos. These inner base will offer consistently powerful value and are often part of a specialized build. Soaring Spin, for example, is so good that many Twin Blade players on the Chinese servers use it specifically to trigger the dodge-based tier 6 effect on the breaking point, which is the strongest inner base in the game. Then the Fury Harvest and the Follow Leech will synergize extremely well with the high frequency damage styles and offer excellent sustain and damage bleeding. Then Base of Charge is a must-have for certain PvP builds due to its burst window potential. Echoes of Oblivion and Vendetta provide incredibly solid offensive boosts that scale well throughout all of the stages of progression. Then Vital Leech and Sword Murph add consistent survivability and rotation smoothness, making them especially valuable in solo play. Wildfire Spark and the Battle Anthem will provide secondary bonuses that help to fill the gaps in your build depending on your weapon's path. Invigorated Warrior will sit at the A tier here, because although it becomes extremely strong at tier 6, it actually hurts your damage before that due to its self-inflicted debuff, and this is why players normally level other general inner base first, and then switch to the Invigorated Warrior later by using the conversion system. So in short, A tier inner base are extremely good, and if you get them early, you should absolutely keep them. And now finally we have the S tier, where we have inner base that define the meta and should be used at least 1 or 2 in every single endgame build. So let's talk about the Morale Chant first. For over a year on the Chinese servers, more than 99% of the players use this inner base. It is the best general pick for every single build in the game, point blank. If anyone tells you that it isn't necessary, then ignore their advice, because it's always worth keeping, always worth leveling, and the earlier you get it online, the stronger your progression curve will be. Next is the 5-fold bleed, which is one of the most deceptive inner base in the entire game. It looks simple as it's only a rare quality, and new players often underestimate it. But don't be fooled, this inner base can contribute nearly 10% of your total DPS in a high frequency weapon paths like the Twin Blades and the Robe Dart. On the Chinese servers, top raid speedrunners relied on the 5-fold bleed for months, because its damage boost is insane when fully leveled. Then Invigorated Warrior, the general version, is also S tier once it reaches the tier 6. Before that point, it can hurt your damage, which is why you delay leveling it early. But once it's finished, it becomes one of the strongest options for scaling burst. And finally, we arrive at the breaking point, which is the single strongest inner base in the entire game in the current version. Physical penetration is one of the most powerful stats that you can stack, and breaking point gives it in huge quantities. Many Twin Blade players specifically will memorize boss attack patterns, so that they can dodge at the perfect moment and trigger the tier 6 effect. You can combine this with the Soaring Spin, and your damage boost will become insane.